well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards, and we're going to be talking about a whole lot of infringement today because we're going to be focused on what's going on in Colorado. And there are just layers upon layers. It's like an infringement onion out there in the Mountain West. Earlier this week, there was a hearing, oral arguments held in a challenge to Colorado's 3-day waiting period. What's interesting here is that the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which has jurisdiction over Colorado, has previously determined that New Mexico's 7-day waiting period violates the Second Amendment. One would think this would be then an easy call for the judge to make here, right? Well, if the 7-day waiting period violates the Second Amendment, then the 3-day waiting period violates the Second Amendment too. It looks like the judge is really looking for a way to uphold the law. We're going to be talking with the named plaintiff in that case, Alicia Garcia. You also know her as the Boomstick Babe on social media. Not just about that case, we're also going to be talking with Alicia about some of the new laws that have taken effect this month. So I think on August the 1st, you had the new permit to purchase law for essentially AR-15s and other gas-operated semi-automatic centerfire long guns. That took effect on August the 1st. And then I didn't even realize this until I was talking with Alicia, but there were several other laws that took effect on August the 12th that also impact both gun owners and gun sellers in the state of Colorado. So it really is an onslaught of infringements taking place there in the Rocky Mountain state. And let's learn all about it with our friend Alicia Garcia. Take a look and a listen. Alicia, thanks so much for coming on the program. It's actually good to meet you virtually in person.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I follow you on X, and folks should be following you on social media if they're not already. How do they find you? What's your handle?
I'm known as the Boomstick Babe or Boomstick Babe on pretty much every platform. I'm pretty notorious. So if you have a hard time finding me, you're living under a rock somewhere. So all you got to do is go to your Google search bar and put in Alicia Garcia. You can put in Boomstick Babe. You will find me. Okay.
And, I would say that you are one of the most outspoken and out in front Second Amendment advocates in the state of Colorado. You are involved in Second Amendment groups. You have your own nonprofit that you recently launched that I want to talk about. You're also the named plaintiff in Garcia versus Polis, which is the challenge to Colorado's 3-day waiting period, right?
Yes. Yes, it is.
All right. So we had oral arguments this week.
Yes.
And I know that as a plaintiff, sometimes the attorneys don't want you talking too much about the case, but
yes,
I was stunned. And I shouldn't be, but I was stunned at some of the arguments that the state of Colorado is making to try to justify this arbitrary waiting period. Like you could pass a background check. The government says you're good to go, but you're not good to go because they say you got to cool your jets for 3 days.
Yes. So originally when the bill was proposed, the bill, if anybody out there wants to reference it, it's HB 23-1219. So in Colorado, it's basically named after the allocation that the bill originated in. So HB House Bill in the year 2023, it was the 1,219th law that they proposed to make or a bill they proposed to become law that year. So Colorado is out of control with regulation. So that bill went into effect on October 1st, 2023. When they were creating the bill, the reason that the bill sponsors said that this was an important bill for them to pass is that people who want to buy firearms are not in the right state of mind, that we probably are wanting to harm ourselves or others. So we should probably take a cooling off period of 3 days because maybe that will help you not want to harm yourself or someone else. So it's a 72-hour waiting period. So you go in, you buy your gun, you pass your background check, you pay your money. That property then technically is yours. But the state is saying, you know what? The gun shop has to hold that gun for you for 3 days, 72 hours until they feel it's, now safe for you to come back and get your guns. So when I'm very active in the community. When I was testifying against this bill and they passed it, Rocky Mountain gun owners approached me and they said, we want to sue against this. And I said, I'm your gal. I'm more than happy to do that because not only are guns an everyday part of my life, they're a part of my career. And, to be quite frank, why should it matter how many guns that I have? What if I have one or I have 15? The urgency of the tool remains the same. And this doesn't just affect firearms educators and firearms instructors like myself. It affects the normal, average, everyday person. And the most urgent tool you'll ever need is a firearm. When somebody is trying to harm you or hurt your family, are you going to say, wait, hold on, bad guy? What you're doing is illegal and this is a gun-free zone, so stop it. You're in my no-no square. That doesn't really work. So what we need is that sense of urgency. And to me, it was kind of a no-brainer to say, you know what, I'm going to push back and I'm going to fight. Let's go for it.
Well, I'm glad that you are. And, you brought up a couple of things, right? So, all right, so this is a cooling off period. It's supposedly meant to, stop people who have suicidal ideation. This applies to people who already are gun owners, right? I mean, if you're buying your 12th gun
Yes.
or your second gun, you still have to go through a waiting period, even though you have a gun at home, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And also that is part of their argument. Well, you already have so many guns. What's the problem with waiting just a little bit more? And that's the psychology that they use, right? That's the way that they dumb down the urgency of the tool as well. You already have guns. What's it to you to wait 3 days? What, you don't think it's essential for you to wait days? What, you don't want to be safe? What, you don't want this stuff? And they make it seem like asking us to compromise isn't a big deal. And that's how that they have begun to take control in Colorado. It's that same ideology of, how do you begin to eat an elephant, right?
Mm-hmm.
One bite at a time. So it's these slow incremental egregiances that they push. And the next thing you know it, you're already down this rabbit hole of gun control and you've dug yourself this deep, grave.
Right. Well, and that's, and I mean, they're trying to flip the script on a right. It's not that, what's the issue here? You already have a gun. No, the issue is, why do you think you have the right to arbitrarily tell me I have to wait 3 days to exercise this right? And I understand the argument about, impulsive purchases. People go on to take their lives. Unfortunately, that does happen in a small number of circumstances. But you talk about the other side of that, those individuals who need a firearm. Let's say there's somebody who is, leaving an abusive relationship and they are concerned for their safety or the safety of their children. I don't want them waiting 3 days to have to get a firearm. We know that, abusers are willing to violate the law. So even if they don't own a gun, they can get one illegally. I just, from a constitutional perspective, it doesn't make sense because we didn't have any cooling off periods in history. But even from just a practical, pragmatic point of view, this doesn't make sense to me.
So one of the things that we did, and when I say we, I'm talking about my society of people that I work with here in Colorado. I have a very stellar team. I don't want to give the impression that, I'm just this lone wolf. I started off that way. I was very much alone for the past, 10 years or so that I was just, I was going down to the Capitol. I was pushing back against all this gun control. And I was very, very much alone. There was maybe 5 people that were at the Capitol that were gun owners that were pushing back. And it was very, very sad. We don't have a lot of presence. Actually, we have one national gun organization that is active in Colorado, and that's the NRA. There's no other national organizations that have anything here. No people, no support whatsoever. So this is basically us, we the people, fighting back with local gun organizations. And I kind of partnered with some to, fight back. And one of the things that we have found is, all of this data that these anti-gun organizations are using are based on biased data. It's confirmation bias. They're being funded by anti-gun organizations to find indeed that guns are bad. Right? So we're going to pay you all this money to cultivate this study. And of course, they're going to find in this study that guns are harmful. Well, if we look at those data sets, they are biased data sets. So what my peers did is they said, you know what? Your data sets are biased. And they said, well, we're not going to use your data sets. We're not going to use NRA data or NSSF data. So we said, okay, well, why don't we hit the reset button and why don't we use bipartisan objective data. Everybody agrees to only use Colorado-based bipartisan objective data, and then we can move forward if your goal truly is safety. So what they did, and the people that I work with, me and my friends, put together the website coviolence.org. It's the Colorado Bureau, Colorado Bipartisan Violence Report, and it's based on 10 years of violence statistics only in Colorado. Mm-hmm. So undeniable data sets. And what we have found is pretty confounding. So the majority of violence that happens in Colorado is domestic violence. It's 67% of the violence that happens. So you're most likely going to encounter violence in Colorado in your home. The second place you're going to encounter it is transitional spaces, coming and going, what I like to call the watering holes of the world, right? Where predator and prey have to commingle at all times. So those are the most likely places you're going to encounter danger. Well, also, what was very interesting is only 3% of domestic violence involved a firearm. So the past couple of years, they passed Proposition KK, which basically gave an excise tax of 6.5% of money to domestic violence abuse victims and veterans, which why are we paying as a demographic of gun owners for domestic violence when we are not the demographic that has any input on that violence? We're not the people committing those acts. So when you're talking about the 3-day waiting period, most likely the person that needs that gun is in a situation where they are in imminent threat of serious bodily injury and or death to themselves or their children or their family from someone that they love who has absolute immediate access to them. So if you're telling that person who is in fight or flight, who needs to leave a potentially violent and lethal situation, that, hey, hope so that that person doesn't kill you in 3 days, that's terrifying.
Right.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. It is.
So, that's one of the reasons that I want to be so vocal and change this.
Yeah. And getting back to the excise tax that was put in place, look, again, domestic violence is an issue, and I've got no problem with government funding for that. But the question again becomes, why single out gun owners for this, right? Is this not a concern for every Coloradan? And again, I mean, this is how they play the game, right? If you oppose this, you must be okay with domestic violence. Well, no, I'm not. But I want to know why gun owners are the ones who are tasked with paying for this, as opposed to, a half a penny sales tax that every Coloradan would pay. I mean, there are the way that they try to emotionally manipulate the argument. It doesn't just happen in Colorado, obviously, but they've got a lot of practice doing this in Colorado.
Yes.
So I want to talk about some of the new laws that have taken effect, because August 1st, we had the new permit to purchase law kick in.
Yes.
And they don't call them assault weapons, I don't think. There's some really weird term that Colorado is using for the guns that now require a permit to purchase.
That weird term is called specified semi-automatic firearms.
Okay.
Indeed. So what they have done is they have played word salad. They are taking a cue from word salad Wanda herself, and they're saying, you know what, let's start going here. So this was an incremental change. I want to articulate this very specifically. So what the state of Colorado did back in 2013, let's rewind it all the way back. They proposed the assault weapons ban, the first of its kind in Colorado, that banned magazines that have 15 rounds or more. Well, gun shops, as well as sheriffs and law enforcement, said this is small potatoes. We don't want to even deal with this. We have bigger fish to fry. There's more important things that we need to be focused on than demonizing gun owners for owning and possessing magazines that have 15 rounds or more. Same thing with gun shops. Well, of course, the anti-gunners didn't like that. They're like, what? You're going to still continue to sell these magazines, and gun shops were just, popping the base plate out, pulling the spring out, and selling magazine rebuild kits. So now we're technically not violating your laws, and people can still get the equipment that they needed. Well, what they did was very clever. They created a state permitting for gun shops back in 2024 that said, you know what, we're going to find a way that we can hinder you and bind your hands as gun shops, because right now we don't have a way to come at you. you're only answering as gun shops to the feds and to the ATF and stuff. So we need a way for the state to get involved. That way we can tie the hands. So they created a state permitting for gun shops. What they did is they know that they have a supermajority of Democrats running the state legislature. There's no way that they can't get away with what they're doing because there's not enough people to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
So they created that. Then they created a Gestapo for gun shops through the Department of Revenue. They gave law enforcement capabilities to the Department of Revenue. So now they can show up at gun shops with law enforcement capabilities without the constraints of law enforcement requirements such as body cams, uniformed, etc. So they can show up at gun shops and say, hey, you know what? We don't like what you're doing. We're going to audit you and we're going to pull your permit so you can't conduct business. And so what they've also done is they set this up. So now there's a way for them to audit gun shops and kind of enforce their will upon them. So now they created what they call the firearms assault weapons bans, or bans on specified semi-automatic firearms. So they are magazine-fed, gas-powered firearms. So if you want to go buy guns that are magazine-fed, gas-powered semi-automatics, you have to ask the state for a permit to purchase those guns. And that turns the state process into a may issue. So right now in the state of Colorado, the concealed handgun permitting process is a shall issue. So they can't exercise discretion. They have to, if you meet the requirements for concealed handgun permitting, they just have to be administrator. They have to rubber stamp it and they have to issue it to you. This process turns it into a may issue. Now the sheriff's department can exercise discretion based on your personal recognizance if they want to allow you to have that permit to purchase these firearms.
Right. And some sheriffs are just not issuing the permits at all, right? They're saying this is an unfunded mandate, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Which kind of proves the point that this is, in fact, may issue.
Yes.
Because there are some counties where it's no issue. And that's
Yes.
perfectly fine under the law.
Yes. And the problem with that is, and don't get me wrong, I want to be very clear that, I believe in sheriffs saying, no, we're not going to partake in these things. I believe in them saying, hey, these laws are stupid. We don't want anything to do with it.
Mhm.
But the problem with that is now with a 3-day waiting period, now with certain shops and educators not providing resources for these, what it does is it helps the disarmament agenda.
Yeah.
It helps people, or it prevents people in rural Colorado that, if you have to, and this is one of the arguments also that my attorney had in court on Monday for the 3-day waiting period, is if we're looking at this as a constitutional basis, if you articulate that in the sense of you are somebody in the rural Colorado area, or you are in the 1800s and you have to, horse-drawn buggy or whatever, ride into town for 3 or 4 days to go buy the arms that you need, the last thing you want to do is say, you know what, now I have to sit around in town and wait for you to give me the supplies and the guns that I need to protect my family or protect my livestock or
Right.
protect my property. So that's basically the same thing. So what they're doing is they are creating a hard access point. So if you're in rural Colorado, what if you're elderly? What if you need help and assistance to get into town? Or maybe you're handicapped, you don't drive, you need somebody to drive you there and bring you back. How are you supposed to retrieve those life-saving tools that you are essentially guaranteed by being an American citizen? So that's another issue that we're having.
Yeah. And then I confess, Alicia, I didn't even realize this, but you had even more laws kick in on August 11th, right?
12th. Yes, August 12th. So what happens is when bills are created in the state of Colorado, if there is no enactment date, they are enacted 90 days after the bill is signed into law.
Okay.
So a lot of those bills were signed into law, of course, 90 days before this August. So what happens is 5 gun bills went into effect on that day. One of them is a red flag expansion bill, SB 26004.
Oh, this is the one that institutions can now apply
Yes.
for, right?
Mhm.
All right. I got to ask you before we go any further, because I saw this and I thought, okay, there's a problem here, because under Colorado's red flag law, if you file a false report, you can actually be charged criminally.
You should be.
But how does that happen if an institution is filing and not an individual? How do you, how does that work?
Well, that's funny that you ask that, because another portion of SB 26004 that went into effect is it gives immunity to those that would red flag you. So there are no repercussions for somebody coming forth to red flag you. Now, in the red flag process, you absolutely are allowed to know and confront your accuser. However, the way this works is that within 72 hours of somebody red flagging you and alerting law enforcement or government, there is a judge that hosts a hearing without your knowledge about you. They issue that temporary red flag. They show up to your home. Law enforcement does. They confiscate your guns and ammunition. They give you a court order and hey, here's your paperwork saying now the burden of proof falls upon you, the respondent, to prove to the state that you are absolutely of sound mind and body and you are not a danger to yourself or others, which there is no, what is the standard to be able to reference of your mental state before you were red flagged?
Right.
Unless you were actively involved in some sort of mental health program for yourself. There is no standard to uphold you to say indeed that you are of sound mind and body. So now, not only is the burden of proof on you as the respondent, there is no repercussions for that person to get the government involved into your home and take possession of your equipment.
All right. So we've got the red flag expansion. What are some of the other laws that kicked in on the 12th?
The other one is HB 261126. I know I sound so like a Rain Man over here, like, right? So that bill is probably, in my perspective, I think it's the worst bill that they passed this year. It is basically going to hinder your ability to access gun shops. It attacks gun shops at the heart of them. So for everybody out there listening, I am also a founding director of the Colorado Federal Firearms Licensee Association. I'm in a position of media, communication, and public relations with my great friend Sean Steele and the board of directors that he has cultivated with other FFLs and attorneys. So that we established that in 2024 because of all the attacks on gun shops. So what HB 1126 does is it gives requirements for security to gun shops, whether they're mom and pop shops, whether they're home-based FFLs, et cetera, that they have to meet proper security requirements. They have to have bars on the windows. They have a live feed now of CCTV. They have to give access of the video to law enforcement at any time that they are requested to. If they are in violation of any of these things that the state feels that they need, they can be fined $75,000 per fine, per overstep. So per our calculations, this is going to shut down about 48% of gun shops in Colorado because they can't meet the financial burden to secure their locations in the perspective that the government wants to. And my question to these legislators when they created this is, why do we not have these types of security measures in place at schools? Why are we focusing on that for gun shops when we're not hardening our schools as targets? Why should gun shops be forced to bear the weight and the burden of those security measures when that's not stopping violence?
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic point. And, I think the answer is pretty clear, right? It's not about public safety. It is about making it harder to purchase a firearm. It's about reducing the number of gun stores in the state of Colorado and eventually destroying a culture of lawful gun ownership so that guns are seen as taboo and forbidden and dangerous by most people, right? I mean, this is, and they've been working at this for decades in Colorado.
Yes. And for everybody out there listening, if you're not familiar with how this became in Colorado, because people often say to me, Colorado used to be such a free state. It was the Wild West. It was the home of the rancher, and it used to be such a beautiful place. Do yourself a favor, go on YouTube and watch the documentary, The Rocky Mountain Heist. It's only 45 minutes. It will explain to you how the Big Four have created this environment in Colorado purposely because they want to eradicate the Second Amendment here. This is the testing ground to do that in Virginia and Texas. And people say, well, that'll never happen in Virginia. That'll never happen in Texas. Well, it's happening now.
Because I live in Virginia. I'm not saying that. We saw this. Absolutely. Yes. In one session, we had more than a dozen gun control bills pass.
Yes.
Thankfully, the worst has been enjoined by a lawsuit, but there are new storage requirements for your home, for your vehicle. There's a jobs placement program for gun control activists. There's the new, I think, Virginia Center for Gun Violence Prevention. And they're coming back for more. Actually, we had an 11% excise tax that was introduced. They waited. They took that off the table because the Democrats went a little tax happy. And they started to get a lot of criticism for that because their message was affordability when they were running. And then they got into office and it was like, we're going to tax everything. So they pulled back on a lot of these taxes, but it's still floating out there. And I think you're absolutely right about Colorado being a test case. I mean, I was there on the ground during the recall elections in 2013 as a result of the magazine ban, as a result of the imposition of these gun laws. And, I've been trying to pay very close attention to what's been going on in the state ever since, because you guys really are the testing ground for so many gun control advocates. You even had the wackos out of the state capitol, was it last year, who were pushing for Governor Polis to sign an emergency proclamation that would have essentially suspended the Second Amendment altogether, like no gun sales anywhere in the state. Do you remember that? They were holding this like 3-day sit-in.
So we have a high concentration of communists and socialists here, and it's disgusting. I've been really involved in the past 10 years. I didn't really want to be involved before that because, frankly, I hate politics. I hate politicians. They're very, very awful to deal with. But it got to the point that it was like, why is nobody doing anything? Why is nobody saying anything? Why are we just tolerating this? And honestly, I think the reason Colorado has suffered the way it has is because of apathy in the gun community. And I think, nobody wants to speak up and say, hey, we're the problem. But you're the problem, gun owners in Colorado that refuse to vote, that aren't registered to vote, that don't get involved. You'd be surprised how many people I teach for my renewal classes that come in. They have absolutely no understanding of anything that's going in Colorado. They don't train. They don't practice with their firearms. They have really, really lax and bad habits with firearms. And I'm like, you are the problem. You make people like me look horrible because you're over there sitting saying, oh, shall not be infringed, but you're part of the infringement. Your inactivity is creating apathy.
Yeah.
And I think that everybody needs a good swift kick in the pants. And frankly, it was like, well, if I'm not going to be part of the solution, I'm part of the problem. So I better start being a part of that solution. And I just started, going for it. I just stepped in and said, so what, now what? And I get a lot of slack for it. To be quite honest, I get told even by my community, even by the gun community, oh, you're too outspoken. You speak up too much, you're too this, you're too that. You know what? They can all kiss it, because this is what's happened because of it. I've actually got people involved. I've gotten people like you who would want to give me, access to your platform and to your audience, which I'm ever grateful for. Thank you so much, by the way, for inviting me to be here and bringing awareness to this cause. And that's the whole point, right? Is like, do people not remember that we do have the freedom of speech? We do have the freedom of rebellion and resistance. These are American values that our country was founded on. And you're telling me that I'm too rebellious? I'm too outspoken? It's like, do you hear yourselves right now? Like, this is insulting. So, I would encourage more people to be more rebellious and be more outspoken and start speaking up more.
Absolutely. Alicia Garcia, thank you so much for coming on the program. I hope that you'll come back in the future.
Anytime you want me here, I'd be more than happy to do that. I would love to inform people. So, what I've done this year is a lot of advocacy work, but we have coviolence.org. If you want to go take a look at that data set, I would highly suggest people do. It's very, very confounding. I've also created my own nonprofit this year called Colorado Cares for Safety. It sounds very democratic, sounds very liberal. I know that it does because I have to work in a very liberal and democratic state. And so It needs to appeal to all people. This isn't just for gun owners. I want this to be something that I want all people involved in. What I'm doing is taking away, I want to start getting donations and, pulling away funding from gun control and doing it to invest back into our community, providing free gun safety education, free safe storage, free domestic health, and domestic violence resources, mental health resources that are anonymous. I want to provide access to situational awareness and de-escalation education, as well as access to emergency first aid, how to stop the bleed, individual first aid kits for homes, as well as our schools. And, I want to also give scholarships to the FASTER program, which is our program here in Colorado that arms people who work in schools and gives them that training. And I also want to give scholarships to people to get concealed carry and also this permit to purchase, because I see a lot of that socioeconomic and financial barriers for people to access these resources. So
Yeah.
I want to come in and take care of that and start rehabilitating our community with education. So that's what we are doing. If you are interested in supporting that, I'd really appreciate it.
What's the
Also,
website?
the CFFLA, it's ColoradoCaresForSafety.org. The website is literally being built right now. I have my IT guy building it. If you want to donate, they can go to all my profiles. There is links in all my profiles that they can donate to me. You can also donate to Mountain States Legal Foundation, my attorneys in the 3-day waiting period case, because they are doing that 100% pro bono. So please donate to them. They are also the attorneys suing against Senate Bill 25003. So they are great people. I'm also involved in the Colorado Federal Farms Licensee Association. If people would like to get involved in that, we have a great AI that we built. My genius President Sean Steele put together his own AI that we call Umbrella, that he wrote the code for. We have dumped a whole bunch of data sets when it comes to gun control, laws, bills, testimonies into it. And it gives us back great information. So they can go to cffla.org, use the Colorado gun law and the gun chat bot. It'll give them all the information that they need to know.
Fantastic. Alicia, thanks again for your time today, and have a great rest of your week, and look forward to doing this again soon.
I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much.
My thanks to Alicia for joining us on the program, and looking forward to having her back again in the very near future, because God knows there'll be something to talk about related to Colorado here before long. Let's turn our attention now to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We will start there. This is actually an update on a story we talked about earlier in the week, the stabbing on the Atlanta Beltline. There was a guy, the suspect in this case, 30 prior arrests. And now this man's family is speaking out, saying that they wanted him off the streets too, that they worried that something like this was going to happen. But time and time again, the criminal justice system just kept releasing Jonathan Hamby. So this is from Channel 11, the NBC affiliate in Atlanta. They say in a lengthy letter released on Monday addressed to the Atlanta community, neighbors, and leadership, the family apologized to the family of the 29-year-old who was stabbed to death and apologized to the city of Atlanta as a whole. They acknowledged that they too wondered, again, why somebody with such a lengthy criminal history, including previous knife attacks, was out and about. The family wrote, "We are deeply, unreservedly sorry. The pain inflicted upon the victim, their family, and every person who witnessed or was impacted by this tragedy is immeasurable." They said that Jonathan Hamby has severe mental illness, experiences active psychosis, which they believe contributed to years of instability and encounters with the criminal justice system. But they said they also repeatedly tried to get courts and others involved, and they felt like they were without a workable way to intervene. The family wrote, "The question our community is asking is entirely justified. Why was a convicted felon with 30-plus arrest cycles on the street, and why did he have weapons?" They said, "This is a question our family has been asking for years." Hamby was on probation in multiple cases out of Fulton County and DeKalb County. Again, at least 30 arrests, 2 separate aggravated assault cases involving attacks with knives. In 2017, he pleaded guilty after he was indicted for stabbing a man. He was sentenced in 2020 to 25 years, but just 3 of those were in prison. The other 22 years were on probation. His probation was later revoked, which meant he could have gone to prison for the entirety of that 25-year sentence, but nope, his probation was reinstated instead. And then in 2013, in DeKalb County, Hamby was indicted, accused of stabbing another man. He pleaded guilty in 2024. He got a 10-year sentence, but only 2 years to serve in prison. And that was reduced to time served because of the amount of time he spent in jail awaiting trial. So after he took that guilty plea, he was immediately let loose. He, again, was supposed to be on probation, but according to court records, he failed to report probation check-ins. He failed to complete anger management. He failed to obtain a required mental health evaluation. A probation warrant was issued. His probation was ultimately revoked. But again, instead of putting him in prison, his probation was reinstated in March of this year with additional conditions. Now, that is the dumbest thing that I've heard. You've got somebody who, again, we know that he's a violent offender. We know that he is not complying with the terms of his probation. So what do? They put more conditions on his probation. Well, if he's not complying with the current conditions, why would you think he would comply with more of them? The community is right to be asking questions, but the community is also right to be angry. Because again, it's not like this came out of nowhere. You've got somebody who police knew was a threat, who prosecutors knew was a threat, who the judicial system knew was a threat. And it seems like the criminal justice system went out of its way to ensure that this guy not only didn't go to prison, but didn't get the mental health help that he needed either. Yeah. Ask those questions. And be angry. Because the system failed. And again, it's not like this is unusual. This isn't the exception. This is the rule. This is how the criminal justice system operates. With 95% of felony cases resulting in plea bargains, this is what you get. And the people of Atlanta, people of the United States, deserve better. All right, on to today's Armed Citizen story from Toledo, Ohio, where a pizza delivery man fired at a suspect after he was robbed and shot at. Don't have a lot of information beyond the headline. This comes from WTOL in Toledo. It was Monday night. A employee at Happy's Pizza reported to police that he was held up at gunpoint while delivering a pizza. The 39-year-old victim was robbed while he was delivering a pizza pie to a home on Bloom Street about 8 p.m. in the evening. Victim said after the suspect shot at him, he drew his gun and returned fire. No injuries were reported. No suspects have been named. I don't think anybody's been arrested. And I was thinking about this when I saw this headline. When I first started doing Cam and Company back in 2004, it was not uncommon at all to run across stories, particularly of pizza delivery drivers who were acting in self-defense. These stories, I feel like, and again, this is based on anecdotal evidence of me looking for armed citizen stories every day. I feel like these incidents of self-defense on the part of pizza delivery drivers are not happening as often as they used to. Maybe that's because, again, crime is declining. We're seeing fewer robberies, so fewer opportunities to act in self-defense. But I also wonder, too, if things like, Uber Eats, DoorDash, if those aren't replacing pizza delivery drivers. And we know that Uber, for instance, has a driver disarmament policy. So I'm actually wondering if one of the reasons why it appears that we're seeing fewer defensive gun uses involving pizza delivery drivers, there might be fewer pizza delivery drivers too, right? In addition to less crime. But I have a sneaking suspicion that more drivers are unarmed these days because of the companies that they work for. And back then, every major pizza chain had a policy that drivers had to be disarmed. The small independent shops typically did not. Domino's ended up changing their policy after a young woman used her firearm in self-defense to protect herself against an armed robber and was fired. And there was an outcry. I believe that might have actually taken place in Georgia. And she was actually rehired. And then the company kind of quietly changed its policy. So we actually don't have the driver disarmament policies from the major pizza chains that we used to, but we still have them from a lot of these, third-party food delivery systems. Anyway, I'm glad that this individual is okay. Hopefully they'll be able to make an arrest. And hopefully, it's not a bad thing that we're seeing fewer of these stories, because hopefully, again, that means that there are fewer delivery drivers who are being accosted and robbed. But it is a dangerous job. And if you have to do it, I don't think you should have to be disarmed while you're on the clock. Finally today, our good deed of the day. In the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. Some good Samaritans who rescued a crash victim in North Carolina as a fire engulfed their vehicle. A scary situation in Greensboro, North Carolina. Michael Bailey said he was by the Friendly Shopping Center on Monday morning when he heard a crash. He said he was grabbing breakfast at a McDonald's nearby. It was about 9:30 in the morning. He said he saw a crushed car by a pole. And he said he immediately just ran over. It was just instinct. He said it was just crazy. He said it was an incredibly loud crash. He said, I knew it was high impact just from hearing the sound of it. And I was like 50 yards away, he said. So he said, fight or flight just kicked in. I thought I got to go help. By the time he ran over there were already other Good Samaritans who were trying to reach the driver. And then Bailey saw the flames and he thought to himself, all right, I need to help them in any way that I can. So he started throwing dirt on the fire. Another man was able to grab a fire extinguisher from his car, but the flames continued to grow. Bailey said the flames were as tall as I am. He said there's black smoke everywhere. 2 other Good Samaritans broke through the window of the vehicle, and then Bailey was able to pull the driver out. He said, I reached in and I said, listen, buddy, I know you're hurt, but I got to move you. I got to get you safe. Crash happened about 9:30, according to Bailey, but first responders say they got a 911 call just after 10 a.m., and they ended up not bringing anyone to the hospital, which is amazing. Bailey said in that situation, every second mattered. He said everybody just kind of fell in sync together. 4 random men. Well, I don't know who those other 3 Good Samaritans are, but I am glad that all 4 of them saw what happened and, again, came to the aid of this stranger in need. So Michael Bailey, the 3 other guardian angels there in Greensboro, North Carolina, we thank you for your very, very good deed. And I want to thank you, as always, for being a part of the program today. I really do appreciate it. Just a reminder, by the time you see this, probably going to be too late for this week, but every Wednesday we do our VIP Gold and Platinum live chat. Hot Airs, Ed Morrissey and myself. It's Wednesdays at 1:30 Eastern. We'd love for you to be a part of that next week. All you have to do is go become a VIP Gold or Platinum member. And to do that, best way is to go to bearingarms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code FIGHT, and you can take 60% off your membership. That applies as well to your basic level VIP membership. And no matter which level you choose, you are going to be supporting the work we're doing at Bearing Arms, and that really does mean a lot. But the benefits accrue as you get higher from the VIP to VIP Gold and VIP Platinum. There's a lot of great benefits involved. I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your Hump Day Wednesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.